Greetings of the day, students. Welcome to Bangla Shikha Classroom 2025, an endeavor of Paschim Bongo Samogra Shikha Mission under the Education Department, Government of West Bengal. I am Mita Dotto, Assistant Teacher of Dokhineshwar Sri Sri Sharoda Devi Balika Bidya Mandir. Today, our teaching learning process revolves around the lesson His First Flight by Liam O'Flaherty of your English textbook Bliss. So students, I would want you to open your textbooks and we go through the beautiful lesson His First Flight. We learn a lot of things from this lesson which you can carry forward in every situation of your life, and you can very well relate it to many of the things we face every day. So now, before going into the lesson, we come to know we read a little about the author. He was born on 28th August 1896 and died on 7th September 1984. He was an Irish novelist. He wrote short stories also. And in the Irish literary renaissance, he was considered to be one of the major figures who contributed to the literature of Irish Renaissance. And what's very special about his writing is his writing revolved around the common people's experience, and he wrote from their set of mind, their perspective. So his contributions to Irish literature has established his reputation as one of the very powerful voices representing the social condition, the political landscape of 20th century Ireland. What he wrote was a representation of the society during that period of time. And he wrote about the human struggles in the society in the backdrop of Ireland's rugged coastline. So his story, The First Flight, tells us about the story of a very small seagull who was trying to learn flying but could not because he was very fear of falling down into the large ocean which was below. So in this narrative, what we see is the author emphasizes on the skill of winning over the fears that are inherent in us. So it speaks of independence, courage, and conquering fears, conquering our small doubts which we have within ourselves, which prevents us from doing something successful. So in the course of this lesson, along with the little seagull, Liam O'Flaherty also helps us identify the fears within us and how easily we can overcome the fears once we handle it with courage and independence. So what are the key aspects of the story? In this story, the protagonist or the hero is a young seagull which is a small little beautiful bird who is very afraid of flying, of taking its first flight, flying for the first time. He has never done it before, so he doesn't have the confidence that he can fly without falling. So to explain the story, the author has beautifully created a plot in which we see there is the family of a seagull who encourage him to fly. We see his brothers and sisters, they are already flying, they have already learned to fly, and the parents are very proud to see their children fly. And along with flying, they can also meet their hunger. They can fly, they can eat whenever they are hungry, but we see this little hero of our story. He is very fearful of flying, but at the end we see hunger is one of the driving forces which actually forces him to fly without even realizing that he has overcome his fear unknowingly. So it means that he was so hungry that for a little moment he forgot his fear. And that moment was the moment of transition which helped him overcome the fear of flying. Suddenly he realized that yes, he could fly, and just the time he realized that he could fly, that gave him the courage, the independence to move forward. So the theme of this story is actually a metaphor for human experiences also. Now, what is a metaphor? Metaphor is a thing which is a representation or a symbolism of something else. So here, what is the metaphor? Here we see the bird overcoming its fear of flying. And the metaphor is, the symbolism is that we as human beings and you as little students, you must also be facing this, that you feel very like unhappy or very frightful of doing some things because you don't have the courage to think that yes, I can do it. But once you can do it, you can very easily go to the next step and like you can go towards the success. So this story is a symbolism of the daily fears that we meet in our lives and also how naturally we can conquer it once we are in the mind frame to do it. Now this, as we have already discussed, this is a story by Liam O'Flaherty. It gives the account of a young bird who is taking its first flight. He is afraid to fly for the first times and he has the belief that his wings will not support him. He thinks that if I fly, I will fall down. My wings are not going to hold me in the air. But there is also this reality in front of him that his brothers and sisters are flying fearlessly with much smaller wings. Like his parents, they have big wings, but his brothers and sisters, they have small wings. He can see them flying, but yet he does not have that confidence of flying. He thinks that his small wings won't be able to hold him in the air. So what his mother does is, the whole family does not go and meet him, makes him feel lonely there and also to stay hungry. Nobody goes and provides food there. So that is his punishment of being so afraid, of not having confidence in himself. So what his mother does is, knowing that the little bird is very hungry, his mother carries a fish in her beak, goes towards the little bird, but doesn't go very near him. But the little bird thinks that his mother is coming and giving him the fish. But actually it was not so. So in that moment, the bird was hungry and the food was just in front of him. So in a moment, out of hunger, he, even without realizing, just dived towards the fish which was in his mother's beak to get hold of that. And he realized that, okay, he already has left the ledge of that mountain. He was already in the air and he realized that he was not falling down. And that was his moment of victory, that realization. So actually his mother, what she did, created a trap for him which compelled him to fly without even thinking. And he naturally and spontaneously realized that he has already won over his fear of not being able to fly. So, this lesson is a reflection of how one's hesitation to take the first step actually holds back the success. Why was he afraid so much? Because it was in his mind that he was hesitating. He was thinking that no, I cannot. But actually, he did not trust his ability. So in that moment, when there was no time for him to think of that fear which was actually obstructing his flight, he actually could do what his parents were wanting him. And that led him forward, because once he realized that he was not falling and his wings were holding him back in the air, he got that confidence. So, we see that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. So, he was suffering in hunger. He thought he couldn't do the flying activity. It was all wrong actually. And he was suffering in his mind because he was not trying. So what we see in this from this story is the fear of the bird which kept him isolated. Isolated from what? Isolated from being with his family to fly and be together. And just because he was not participating in the activity that his family was doing, his family also put him in isolation and let him remain in hunger. And we see that hunger and temptation. So that by that hunger, he was feeling weak, and the hot sun was already in the ledge, and like he was feeling very hot and out of his hunger, he did not have that ability to bear that heat. So he was actually maddened by hunger, and he was watching in that madness that his mother was carrying a piece of fish which he wanted to have. So, out of desperation to meet his hunger, to keep him away from that hunger, he desperately dived, and as he was tempted by his hunger to eat that fish, he could fly at last. So that discovery that he could fly, he could automatically keep himself up in the air, and he was automatically flapping his wings and balancing himself in the air. That gave him the courage. That discovery gave him the courage. So, we see the bird who was terrified at the beginning. He soon started to experience joy and the excitement of flying. And he forgot his previous fear and was a part of the entire family coming out of that fear and isolation. So, his reunion with his family, flying together, joining the family also celebrated his flight, his successful first flight, by offering him more food and flying together. And all of them were celebrating this achievement of his first flight with independence. So his progress to success actually was his faith, the leap of faith, which the role of hunger was a huge part. So what we see, how was this progress made from his fear of flighting to his mother creating a trap for him, in which the role of hunger was a big part. The role of hunger was a big part because it made him forget his fright and made him jump for the food. And this jump was the jump of faith, because this jump made him realize that yes, he can. And that he can gave him the faith to overcome all the fear he had. So actually, the impulsiveness he felt from intense hunger gave him that drive to fly, and that was the faith which plays a big part in his success. So we have a lot to learn from here, that in our daily lives we may be facing many such things which actually create a hindrance within us, an obstacle within us, because we don't believe that much in ourselves. We are fearful that maybe we won't be able to do the work successfully. But unless we try, we will not be able to identify whether we can or we cannot. So just like the little bird, the little seagull did, impulsively he drove and realized that he can fly. He overcame his fear, he overcame his ideas, his wrong ideas that he cannot, and ultimately he had faith in himself. So like that little bird, we get this lesson that even if we try and overcome the first fear within ourselves, we have a lot of possibility of succeeding in whatever we are doing. So here is a beautiful picture. Here are two beautiful pictures, in fact. One, we see that the seagull is very sad and looking towards his family, expecting to fly, but having a lot of fear, especially seeing the sea below. He had the fear that once he cannot balance himself in the air, he will fall into that sea. And in the next, we see how he spontaneously dived to get the fish which his mother was carrying near him. So that was the leap of faith, or the flying towards faith, which made him realize that yes, he can keep himself balanced in the air. Like in the picture, we see that there is no support there. Of course, there is no support there, but once he gave this dive, he begins to fall a little, but his wings automatically balanced him in the air and he was not flying. So that moment of desperation actually turned into a moment of victory or triumph. And he realizes that he can join his family in flying together. So the moral of this story is that though there are barriers in our life, those barriers may be only in our mind. And if we face our fears practically, face to face, then we can actually achieve independence and victory over what wrong ideas we had in ourselves. So this, we see the seagull, little seagull is flying and he is balancing himself, and in the next picture we see the whole family flying together. So there is no isolation anyway. The little seagull has joined his family together. So his fear is no more, his isolation is no more, and there is just newfound freedom and independence of him to flight. So he has already been successful in his first flight. So the theme of the lesson we have actually learned in reading every sentence here in this passage. The author has demonstrated that the first flight is a story of bravery and self-assurance. A brave moment made the little bird feel and assured of himself that he can fly. So it is just a lesson that the author is demonstrating us, that managing one's fear practically and never to give up in any situation. Because the little seagull jumped out of his hunger, even though it was very instinctively, it was out of his hunger and temptation, but yet he did not give up. He jumped into that act of getting the fish from his mother's beaks. So that moment makes us feel that fear exists only in our minds. Once that thought is gone, we can proceed. So independence and self-reliance. Once the seagull relied on his ability to fly, he did not look back again. He did not go back to the ledge again. What did he do? He joined his family and he tried to grow along with them. Grow, why? Because then the proud parents took him around to fly together, and they were then offering him gifts in the form of little scraps of fishes, and also the family in their own ways were teaching him different ways of surviving in that ocean, how to stand on the water, how to balance on the water, how to take fishes out of there for meeting the hungers, etc. So, necessity and action demonstrated by what? Demonstrated by extreme hunger, which forced him to act, but the limitations were gone. Once the limitations were gone, it was self-discovery which led him to go and do many more work, many more activities, which he never imagined he can do. So what is important? Taking the first step. The most important theme of this story is taking the first step. This emphasizes on taking the initial steps even when we are terrified. We need to have that confidence of achieving success and diving into the fearful acts and conquering it. So, the seagull we see has learned to fly because he took the first step. If he did not take the first step, perhaps we don't know what would have happened to him. Something negative would have happened to him. So, we should be taking the first step. Even we have fears, we should conquer that and go forward. So, this is the story that we learned, and the types of questions that you have in your Madhyamik examinations are the ones that are at the back of your back of every chapter, back of every lessons. And even in this, we will see there are choosing correct alternatives. That question is there, which actually carries 1 marks in the Madhyamik examination. Then there are true-false statements with supporting answers. Whether you write true, whether the answer is or the quoted line is true or false, you have not only to write whether it's true or false, you have also to take down or quote lines from the lesson, not your own words, but lines from the lessons which support your answer. Whether it is true or whether the sentence is false, of course, you come to know it from a particular line or some lines in the lesson. So, you have to put those lines or quote those lines in your answers. And there are questions which are of 2 marks. These questions may be just questions, or it can be in the form of cause and effect, or it can be in the form of complete the sentences with information from the text. Whatever the instructions are, it is very important to read the instructions properly and then answer the questions. So, what are the common errors? You will see that in the process of what I discussed in my last slide, while answering the questions, there are spelling mistakes. So, those should be taken care of very, very carefully, because In your Madhyamik examination, you have the passage in front of you even when you answer your exams. So actually there should be cross verification of all the spellings that you write. There should not actually be any spelling mistakes. And while writing answers, the questions in which the direct answers are actually wanted, there you should remember that the answers should not be in direct speech. It should be in indirect speech. You learn narration change and you should remember that the answers always should be written in indirect speech. So this is a very, very common mistake or error that students usually make, and be careful about this. Not following instruction of questions. As I mentioned in my last slide also, that it is very important to read the instructions, because we often see while seeing the scripts that a student knows the answer, but because he has gone through the instruction very hastily and carelessly, even knowing the answer, the student is not answering it in the correct format that is demanded in the question. So read the instructions and follow the instructions very carefully. Then there is faulty sentence constructions, which I would tell you to go through a lot of writing practice to overcome this. Error in writing supporting statements in true false questions. This I mentioned while telling you about the statements that are necessary in the true and false questions. Often we see students writing the supporting statements in their own words, but in this particular case, of course, the answers to the questions should always be in your own words. But when you quote a statement for supporting a true false answer, that should always be quoted from the text. Please be very careful about this, that it should be the exact line from the passage that is given. Now, what will you do to overcome the errors that keep happening? It is by reading the passage or poem, whatever it is, again and again. You have to be very careful in learning the spellings well, because learning the spellings will also let you enhance your vocabulary. Because when we do the lessons, there are the meanings of some words at the end of the lessons, but those are not enough. Even in spite of those meanings being given, we can see more words, we come across more words, the meanings of which we do not know. So, of course, we should look up the dictionary. And looking up the dictionary is a very, very good habit, because there you can see what part of speech that is, the pronunciation, and once you get the pronunciation correct, you will learn the spellings well. And when you enrich your vocabulary, this will remain as a treasure for the entire part of your life, because what you are learning now will be applied in the future in whatever examinations you give and in whatever job you do. That is a very important part. So be very, very careful about learning your spellings well and noting the meaning of new words, as I told, from the dictionary. Make the habit of writing what you learn again and again, because writing makes that learning set in your mind in a much more intense and deep way. So make a habit of writing. Apply the new words that you have learned in your writing skills. In your writing skills, you have paragraph writing, you have flow charts, you have story writing, you have letters. You have a whole variety of writing skills that you are taught and you are to attend in your examinations. So what you learn, what new words you learn, you have a lot of scope to apply those in the writing skill answers. Another important thing is understanding and practicing textual grammar. Textual grammar is given at the end of every lesson. That usually is done in the classrooms, and we will in our next class discuss the grammar and writing skills that are taught in these lessons. Not actually taught, because these are taught in your lower classes also. We will revise it again. And it is not only textual grammar, it is grammar from in general everywhere. Converse in English as much as possible. This is a very good way of learning English in a proper way, which will help you constructing correct sentences also. In your English classroom, of course, you will be conversing in English, but in other classrooms also, when you talk among yourselves, among your friends, try and converse in English, because you never learn a language better than talking in it. Because you will see, when we learn to talk, we talk from hearing our parents, our elders, or our surroundings. Nobody teaches us grammar when we are little kids. We learn it spontaneously. So once you start talking and conversing in English, you will see, like that little seagull who unknowingly came to fly, you will also fly. You will also flourish in conversing in English once you are confident and come out of that shell. Come out with confidence that yes, I can also do it. Because when we speak a foreign language, it is mostly our fear that, okay, we will speak wrongly, we cannot speak properly. That fear keeps us from applying the language in our conversations. So, my students, I think many of you try, but those who have never tried will of course try and converse in English as much as possible. So here in this lesson we have two types of textual questions given. One is choosing the correct alternative. There are 4 options given and a line given. Whichever is the correct alternative, you have to choose that. And there is another answering the questions according to word limits given. Somewhere it's right in 15 words, somewhere it is writing in 25 words. So you have to maintain the word limits, because maintaining the word limits actually teach you how much to the point you can write an answer, which actually prepares you for examinations which you have to give for getting some jobs. They prepare you in every way. Take the correct answer is also one such thing which you will face in your future examinations, and also writing to the point. So what is important is what we have learned, that we have to read the questions first, again and again to look for the correct answer. And while reading the text, we will have in mind what the question is, and according to that, we will identify the correct part from the passage we are reading. And you have to be very detailed about thinking about what marks is given for what, and in your Madhyamik examinations, and I think in your school also in class 9 you are given a question paper in which there are spaces for writing the answers. So the spaces are actually given because we expect the answer to be that much. So writing to the point and utilizing the space properly is also a thing that you should efficiently learn. That will give you an idea of what exactly to include in your answer. And if you think that even while writing an answer, as I told you, it should be in indirect speech, but if you think that for the necessity of an answer, you need to quote some part of the text, you of course can do so, but you will write that within quotation marks to mark that Yes, it is from the text, and of course then you will explain it in your own words. So this is for this part of this lesson today. Thank you for your patient listening, students. And of course, we all would have self-confidence, which we gained more from the little seagull. And we should remember that self-confidence is the greatest courage for any success. So, thank you so much, students. We all need to fly high fearlessly. All the best for a very good learning session. Thank you.